Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The 9th of December is International Anti-Corruption Day. It's an opportunity for us to recommit to collective action in preventing and addressing corruption in the country. Joining us on the line tonight, in conjunction with World Anti-Corruption Day, we have Cynthia Gabriel. She's the Executive Director of the advocacy group Centre to Combat Corruption and Cronyism, or better known as C4. Good evening, Cynthia. Thanks so much for joining us on the show tonight. Now, I'm just wondering, in your perspective, if you were to look back at the year past, has there been progress in preventing and addressing corruption in Malaysia? I mean, have we moved forward or have we regressed based on your assessment?
Thank you, Melissa, for having me on the show. It is really very important that ConsiderThis has agreed to feature World Anti-Corruption Day today. It is slowly gaining recognition this day today, but it's often overshadowed also by many other international days in December. As also because tomorrow is World Human Rights Day, and many people celebrate that. But the first thing I'd like to say is the lack of recognition that fighting corruption is a human rights agenda as well. And the second is to say that we are deeply concerned, really, with the regression that we are seeing today in terms of how corruption is being managed, is being addressed by the people in power in our country, and the massive rollback that we are witnessing today. And I'd like to actually explicitly state one or two things to put into context what I'm referring to.
Yeah, Cynthia, if you could actually give us some examples, that would be really useful. I mean, what for you were the kind of landmarks that suggest there's a regression rather than a progress? Okay,
thank you for that. I wanted to start by saying just a day or two ago, another very scandalized high-level politician was freed at the court, not by the court, but at the court. And this was Tunku Adnan. He was actually charged for receiving donations amounting to 1 million ringgit and for soliciting bribes. So he was not the first politician. This is the third. We had Musa Aman, the former Chief Minister of Sabah, also fully acquitted by the court. And prior to that was the stepson of former Prime Minister Najib Razak. All these personalities were charged with corruption under the Pakatan Harapan administration. It has not seen the full extent of the trial before they were all dismissed. Of course, it's dismissal not amounting to acquittal, but it is very, very discouraging for the fight against corruption.
If I were to focus on, say, the Kunan case that just happened recently, I mean, that was an instruction by the Attorney General's chambers to drop the criminal charges against Tunku Adnan. I'm wondering, Cynthia, where you see the role of the Attorney General's chambers in the fight against corruption through successful prosecution?
Yes. So one of the elements that's completely missing in this country is the culture of transparency. So in a very severe decision like this, there is a public outcry and call for transparency for the reasons why he was given this dismissal. And so there was nothing forthcoming. And that really doesn't augur very well for our corruption perception index for this year. As what we have seen. Now, I'd like to move to another example of why we are really very concerned. And this is related to public procurement. This is related to COVID-19 and how COVID-19 has actually darkened and clouded the whole public procurement agenda in the name of emergency. So in the name of emergency, many corners are being cut. So people cut corners, awards of contracts are being given to companies that have no experience in medical healthcare, for example. in terms of COVID testing 19 kits. And there was also a report by a global analyst that said that bamboo company was also being involved, and that bamboo company belonged to a politician in power to actually secure the rights for vaccines and so on and so forth. So there's very little transparency in this area, and we are very concerned also about the public expenditure that's being rolled out now. Where is the transparency to monitor the public funds that are being used to assist Malaysians, no doubt, but there is very little accountability or transparency of how our cash reserves are also being utilized at this moment. So
Cynthia, Cynthia, can I jump in here and ask you whether ultimately you think the fight against corruption begins with an administration at a federal level committed to the fight, that if there's no political will, or then we'll not see any advance in the fight against corruption?
Yes, it's a lot to do with power. It's a lot to do with money. And so political will is often very hard to come by. So it was really an important point when there was a change of government in 2018, and the National Anti-Corruption Plan was developed at that time. And at that time, it was a very clear, it is still there, but we have no idea if the plan is going to be implemented by this current unelected government that took power in February. So it is a point about tackling corruption both at federal, state government. State government also means local government level. So corruption is actually entrenched at all levels, and it requires political will at all levels of government to fight it. But as long as there's no political will, I think my other point that I wanted to raise with you was about our institutions. They are not independent. And what do I mean by that? The institutions that I'm talking about primarily to fight corruption is the MACC. And during the time of Datuk Seri Akhbar Satar, there was a lot of effort also by the MACC to push for greater reform and independence of the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission. So how? I mean, should we lift it to a constitutional commission, make sure security of tenure of the chief commissioner is assured, that, they may be able to take on the people in highest positions of power, even though they're still in power. And what else that is needed in terms of institutions that require reforms? It would be the judiciary, the PDRM, the Royal Malaysian Police Force, and so on and so forth. And as long as these institutions aren't independent, it makes it really very, very difficult for corruption to be tackled and for political will to actually see the light of day.
Well, speaking about that, Cynthia, I'm just wondering, I mean, where is the political will or the collective will going to come from if we want to strengthen the institutions like MACC? Where do we even begin if we want to have an independent and strong MACC?
Well, that's a really good question. In our opinion, it's certainly not going to come from the politicians. And the only way politicians will be moved, legislators will be moved in Parliament, will be that their constituents and the Malaysian people actually get activated to demand that the politicians that they vote for actually believe in the integrity and will promise them a great degree of accountability when they are in power. Because if they are not, then they should be replaced. And that is the wheel of democracy. We actually strive to bring in a government and an administration that will work for public interest. So to answer that question, it is about the Malaysian people, and it's about citizens exerting their rights to ensure that their elected representatives actually serve their interests. Right now, it is a real worry that the situation of the political crisis is going to be never-ending. We have an economic crisis, and within all that is a clouded situation where we have no transparency over good governance.
Cynthia, so if I can ask you, we had a situation where Malaysians voted. They voted the previous, the Barisan National government out in favor of the Pakatan Harapan government. 22 months in power. And did any of these, you mentioned the National Anti-Corruption Plan, but beyond that, the important point of strengthening institutions and creating independence, that didn't happen in the 22 months. Do you think this was a really missed opportunity? And if so, why? Why did the Pakatan Harapan fail to push through this agenda, which was their own agenda?
Well, it took some time to come up with a plan. I was in the drafting committee of the National Anti-Corruption Plan. So once we had the plan, then we saw Pakatan Harapan rolling back on a few very important commitments. And I must say unequivocally that it was completely frustrating and disappointing as well that some areas of the plan were just being ignored. One of it was political donations. The political donations bill was being ding-donged and not really receiving any commitment by both sides of the parliament. So it was really disappointing, but we had arrived at a point that we had a plan. Now we had to make it actionable. And so perhaps it was important to actually look at where the low-hanging fruits were, where we could actually tackle and achieve some legislative reforms. And one of it that I do recall was setting up of an ombudsman bill to strengthen public complaints and to price transparency into the system. And then there was also the idea of a freedom of information enactment that the late Datuk Liew Yew Kiong had actually publicly announced that it will be tabled in Parliament very soon. However, the Official Secrets Act component would be incorporated into it. So Pakatan was disappointing because they weren't ready to go all the way, but it was an important step that we actually moved towards a plan and that we had to make it actionable. Okay. But the power was seized very early and so on. So I think the lesson to be learned here is that regardless of which political coalition is in power, the only way they will actually behave, if I may use the word, or to serve public interest is for the people themselves to constantly keep them on their toes. And that these promises that were made before the elections must be lived out. If not, don't even make promises. Because we will see very early that the Buku Manifesto was being very, very early in the day.
Cynthia, thank you so much for speaking with us today. We really appreciate your time and you sharing your insights with us tonight. Thank you. We're going to take a quick break here on Consider This. We'll be back with more, so stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. Let's continue our conversation about what Malaysia can do to address and prevent corruption and abuse of power in conjunction with International Anti-Corruption Day. We have joining us now Datuk Seri Akhbar Satar, President of the Malaysia Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. He's also the former President of Transparency International Malaysia. Datuk Akhbar, I just want to begin with a look back at the year. Now, this has been quite an extraordinary year as we fight the pandemic. I want to talk a little bit about COVID-19 and the corruption. Whether you see crises like the COVID-19 pandemic creating opportunities for corruption to thrive, especially since we see the usual safeguards are relaxed under emergency protocols, things like the usual oversight mechanisms, all of that perhaps weakened or disrupted because of our need to immediately react to managing the pandemic. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you, right? All the procedure and rules and regulations are loosened, especially during this emergency, such as the COVID-19. But the problem is that I'm afraid some unethical politicians are taking opportunity, to make full use of this, and of course giving contract to cronies and also to those who are not qualified. And right, a lot of money has been spent during this time, especially for especially for the COVID-19. So I'm quite afraid that the misuse will be making our country corruption worsen. So that's why I think a lot of people are saying that at the moment corruption is a pandemic in Malaysia.
Dato', we started the year off with our rankings in the Transparency International Corruption Index at a fairly good level, and we saw an improvement. We were placed at 51 out of 180 countries. Looking at what's happened since then, much of this year, do you think we'll be able to maintain that ranking? Do you see it strengthen or weaken as a consequence of what's happened over the year?
Actually, of course, we see previous years, right? Especially the CPI 2018. I think our score was 61, So we improved to 51, 10 steps. So there was a lot of jump. It is the significant improvement as far as corruption is concerned in Malaysia, because of the arrest of the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister, and also senior government servant, right? That is very good. And also, the public were confident that the PS government, can do something about to reduce corruption. But unfortunately, frankly speaking, even during PAs also, I think a lot of many promises, especially on the some promises are not fulfilled, especially on the political donation, on the independence of the MACC and also the AG, that kind of thing. But of course, this year you can see it is worsened, right? Because a lot of, especially government servants, has been arrested, and also they found that at least more than 50% of the government servants have been involved in corruption. So, meaning to say that, especially based on statistics given by the MACC, right, from 2019 to this year, October, about more than 55% of the government servants have been arrested.
Well, that is a shocking number, isn't that? I mean, that should shock us all, just listening to that high percentage. I'm wondering, I mean, these rankings, do they matter? Let's say if we're taking into account all the developments of this year and we fall in the rankings, do they even matter to the people in power, to the public, to anti-corruption enforcement officials? Do they matter?
Of course, enforcement agency, especially the MACC, is doing a good job. They are struggling, right? But the problem is that we have a lot of unethical politicians and also government servants who are involved in corruption. So this actually, if you base on criminological study, there are three causes of corruption. One is called, of course, pressure from the spouse, pressure from the work, gambling, hutang, and so on. The other one will be opportunity. Opportunity being politician, you can make decisions, you have discretion power, and also you are working in finance department or contract department, right? That kind of opportunity. And thirdly, the most important will be rationalization. Rationalization means there is an internal dialogue, that between those who are lower than you, the people who work under you. They are saying that if the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister, and the KSU, the KP, and also all my seniors are involved in corruption, why can't I? So this is called rationalization. If everybody is doing it, I will do it. So this is a big problem, meaning to say that the government, the senior government officer, the Prime Minister, the Minister, whoever have power, have to show good example. This is government. You have to show good example. But the main problem here is that some of them, especially politicians, they themselves are involved in corruption, but they openly talk to the public how to prevent corruption. But nobody is going to listen to you, right? So you have to show good example. You have to be whiter than white, because whatever you do, this is very important. People know.
Yeah, it seems to be, there is the problem of hypocrisy. Politicians will, take that moral high ground in talking about the need to fight corruption and then do nothing about it. But let's look at the year. I'm wondering about what seems to be a contradictory picture. So we had those mass arrests, MACC going after the Immigration Department, going very high up in the Immigration Department on one hand, but then we also had the AG's chambers letting high-profile cases off, Musa Aman and Tunku Adnan most recently. How do we assess it? This seemingly contradictory picture?
This is a problem of separation of power in Malaysia, The intervention of the executive, it is very bad. Correct. So actually, there will be three criteria, before you appoint anybody, whether you are Prime Minister, head of department, or whatever, AG or whatever. The first will be integrity, right? What is right, what's wrong, you have to know. The number two will be merit, meaning to say that you know your job, you know the law. But the most important point, the third point will be bravery, berani kerana benar. Meaning to say that you have to take action without fear and favor. But of course, your future will not be bright. But you have to remember, once you have been appointed by the public or by the government, you have to do the job. If you think you cannot do the job, you want also to get involved in politics, you want also to get involved in corruption, or also you are thinking of your future to be promoted, to get extension, to be extended, and your children can get scholarship, that kind of thing, I think it is not the right place for you.
Well,
so this is very important.
We do need to institutionalize the fight against corruption to kind of entrench it into all levels of the country. Where do you see the National Anti-Corruption Plan playing a role in this? Is it, in fact, something that will institutionalize the fight against corruption, or is this more lip service?
I don't know, because you see that the rate of corruption involved by government servants are more serious. By right, the ICC has to focus on government servants, but I really rely on the MACC. Right? They are doing a good job. They have preventive measures, and they are professional. So meaning to say that actually there are three criteria why we fail. Number one is we do not have this sincere political will. Sincere political will, meaning to say that being a government, being a leader of this country or politician, you have to fight against corruption, because corruption would destroy the country. Corruption will also would cause the economic and political stability. Right. But some of the politicians, they don't care, right? Because they are thinking of themselves. They want power. So this is the problem. They don't care about the country. And number two will be the effectiveness of the law enforcement agency, the MACC. So many promises have been made by the Pakatan, by the Berita National, to make more independent. But at the end of the day, they give all kinds of reasons. Political donation, they have been promised, but they don't do it. Finally, the most important will be the support from public, right? Because public are normally givers, When there is no giver, there will be no corruption. Private sector are big givers. So this is very important for us to public not to give, because you have to understand that, like what happened in Western countries. You consider the government servant as your servant, right? You pay them. We pay our from our tax. Right? They have to do the job. They have to respect us. We have to pay them. But the problem is that because you want to jump the queue, you want fast, you pay. So this is a problem about us. Don't give, don't pay. And make sure that you give good information to the MACC. It is very sudden that only 0.01% of the government servants reported the case out of 1.6 million. So it's only how many? 60, 70 people. It is very bad. So something has to be done on this issue. Right? It is very bad. The corruption is very bad now.
Finally, the role of people like ourselves in the media, one MDB case was, exposed precisely because journalists were doing their job. Do you see the Malaysian media stepping up their game and doing enough in terms of investigative journalism to unearth corruption?
Very good point. Overseas, you can see that even in Argentina, they call this, they are involved in open government partnership, where before any policy will be made by the government, you have to involve the media. You have to involve the NGO, to get all this feedback. This is very important. And also the role of media. In Argentina, in fact, all the contract has been published, it is not done here. Has been published, and the media has right to look and comment. And everybody has right to look and comment and see whether it is viable or not viable, it is given to the right person or not. But here, everything is, put under the carpet, unless you ask in the parliament. But this is very unfair. So transparent is very important. So it is exactly, especially during this, prior to this COVID also, there are so many, contract has been given to, we don't know whether they are open tender, or we don't know, we have no information. So media is very important. That's why you see the Panama paper, who has exposed the greatest corruption in the world, including our politicians also, who are in the list. They have done a good job.
Exactly. But
of course, freedom of information is very important, especially for rating. But you have to remember, right? Remember the Fitch rating that downgraded our country from A to B++, and also Petronas. Do you know that why they downgraded, especially for Malaysia? Because of the uncertainty of the governance, and governance also determine the political stability and the stability of the economy.
Yes.
So this is very important.
There is
For us,
definitely an impact of uncertainty and also corruption, good governance to all aspects of the economy, including our credit ratings. That's all the time we have, and I want to thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight on International Anti-Corruption Day. Thank you for your time, Datuk Akhbar. That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, and good night.